This story seemed ordinary at first, but the ending surprised me. Here we go. Hey everyone, I'm a 41M and I've been married to my wife, 39F, for 14 years. We have two amazing kids, a boy and a girl, and up until recently I thought our life was pretty perfect. I don't really know how to start this, but here we go. My wife and I met through mutual friends in college. She was vibrant, intelligent, and had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her feel good. We dated for a few years, and I proposed to her on a beach during a sunset-cleached sea, I know, but it was perfect. We got married a year later, bought a house, and soon after had our kids. Life was good. Over the years, like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but we always managed to work things out. Recently, however, things have changed. My wife started acting differently. She seemed distant, lost in her thoughts, and spent more time on her phone. She was staying late at work more often, and when she was home, she wasn't really present. I tried talking to her about it, asking if everything was okay, but she would just say she was tired or stressed from work. I wanted to believe her, but something just didn't feel right. The intimacy between us started to dwindle, and whenever I tried to be affectionate, she would pull away, saying she was exhausted. Last weekend, she went out with some friends, which she rarely did. She came home late, and when I asked her how it went, she seemed on edge, giving me short, vague answers. I didn't push it, but my gut was telling me something was off. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid, but I can't shake this feeling. I love her so much, and the thought of her being with someone else is tearing me apart. I haven't told anyone about this, not even my best friend, because I'm scared of what I might find out. What should I do? How do I even approach this without pushing her further away? Any advice would be appreciated. Thanks for listening. So, here's what's happened since I last posted. After that weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility that my wife might be cheating. It was eating me alive. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't want to accuse her without any evidence. So I decided to keep a closer eye on her behavior and try to gather some concrete proof. The following week, she went out again. This time, she said it was a work event, but something about the way she said it felt off. She was too casual, too rehearsed. I tried to play it cool and told her to have a good time. As soon as she left, I felt a mix of anger and dread. I knew I had to find out what was really going on. I decided to check her phone. I know, it's a huge invasion of privacy, but I felt desperate. Unfortunately, her phone was locked, and I didn't know the passcode. I waited until she came home and pretended to be asleep. When she got into bed, I noticed she was texting someone, and then she put her phone on silent before going to sleep. The next morning, I woke up early and managed to get her phone while she was in the shower. I tried a few passcodes and eventually got in using our anniversary date. My heart was pounding as I scrolled through her messages. Most of it was normal stuff with friends and family, but then I found a thread with a guy named Chris. Their conversation was sickeningly flirty, with lots of late-night messages, and they had plans to meet up that weekend. There was no explicit mention of anything physical, but the tone was clear enough. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I couldn't hold it in any longer. When she came out of the shower, I confronted her. I asked her straight up who Chris was and what was going on between them. She looked shocked and then angry, accusing me of invading her privacy. She tried to tell me he was just a friend from work, but I wasn't buying it. The evidence was right there in front of us. We started yelling at each other. I told her how hurt and betrayed I felt, and she threw it back at me, saying I was paranoid and controlling. It was the worst argument we'd ever had. Our kids were at a sleepover at their grandparents', which was a small relief because they didn't have to witness it. After hours of back and forth, she finally admitted that she had feelings for Chris, but insisted that nothing physical had happened. She claimed she was confused and didn't know how to talk to me about it. I asked her why she felt the need to hide it if it was all innocent. She had no real answer, just more excuses and deflections. I told her I needed some time to think and left the house to clear my head. I drove around aimlessly, not knowing where to go or what to do. I ended up at a park, just sitting in my car, trying to make sense of everything. I felt lost and shattered. So here I am, reaching out to you all again. I don't know what to believe. Part of me wants to trust her, to believe that nothing physical happened, and that we can work through this. But another part of me feels like a fool for even considering that. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. How do you rebuild trust after something like this? Should I even try? That night, after I left the park and went back home, my wife and I had another long talk. She seemed genuinely remorseful, crying and apologizing for the hurt she caused. She promised to cut off all contact with Chris and said she wanted to work on our marriage. For a moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to the life we built and the love we once shared. We decided to try couples counseling, and she agreed to give me access to her phone and social media to rebuild trust. I thought this was a positive step, a sign that she was serious about fixing things. The first few sessions of counseling were hard, but seemed productive. We talked about our issues, our feelings, and what led us to this point. The counselor gave us exercises to improve our communication and reconnect emotionally. It was tough, but I felt like we were making progress. But then, a couple of weeks later, I noticed she was becoming distant again. She would spend more time working late and seem more engrossed in her phone than ever. One night, I woke up to find her gone from bed. I found her downstairs on the couch texting. When I asked who she was talking to, she quickly put her phone away and said it was just a work email. The suspicion started to gnaw at me again. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I tried to ignore it and focus on our counseling. But the doubts were always there, lurking in the back of my mind. One evening, I decided to check her phone again. I found out she had deleted the message thread with Chris. When I confronted her about it, she got defensive, saying she didn't want to upset me, but I felt like it was a cover-up. We had another huge fight, and this time it got even more heated. I was at a breaking point. I couldn't live in this constant state of suspicion and mistrust. I told her we needed to separate for a while, to give ourselves some space to think. She agreed reluctantly, and I moved into a friend's place for a bit. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, leaving my kids and my home behind, even if just temporarily. During this time apart, I tried to focus on myself and think about what I really wanted. I spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship, trying to figure out where things went wrong and whether it was worth saving. I spoke to my friends and family, seeking their advice and perspectives. Some told me to give it another shot, while others said I deserved better and should move on. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with my kids as much as possible. They were confused and upset about what was happening, and I didn't want them to feel abandoned. I made sure to be there for them, even if I couldn't be physically present all the time. A few days ago, my wife reached out and said she missed me and wanted to talk. We met at a neutral location and had a long, heartfelt conversation. She said she realized how much she loved me and was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. She even suggested we move to a new city for a fresh start, away from all the memories and temptations. I'm torn. On one hand, I still love her and want to believe that we can fix this. On the other hand, the trust is so badly broken, and I don't know if I can ever fully get past what happened. I don't want to uproot my kids and make a rash decision that we might regret later. One night, I decided to follow her. She said she was going to a friend's place for a girls' night out. I tailed her from a distance, trying to stay inconspicuous. She didn't go to her friend's house. Instead, she drove to a hotel on the other side of town. My heart sank. I parked and watched from my car, seeing her meet up with a man I didn't recognize. They went inside together and I just lost it. I burst into the hotel, adrenaline pumping, and demanded to know which room they were in. The receptionist, startled by my rage, refused to tell me. I stormed up the stairs, checking doors until I found the one they were in. I could hear them inside, laughing and talking. I banged on the door, shouting for her to open up. When she finally did, the look of shock and fear on her face confirmed everything. The guy, realizing what was happening, tried to intervene, but I shoved him out of the way. I was seeing red, and I don't even remember what I said, but it was a blur of accusations and anger. My wife was crying, pleading with me to calm down, but I was beyond reason. The guy started to get physical, trying to push me back, and we ended up in a full-on brawl right there in the hotel room. It was messy and brutal, with punches thrown and furniture knocked over. Eventually, hotel security broke us up and threatened to call the police. The guy left quickly, leaving my wife and me standing there amidst the chaos. She was a mess, makeup smeared and sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't even look at her. I walked out feeling a mix of rage and despair. I drove aimlessly for hours, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to go back and confront her again, but I knew it wouldn't solve anything. I ended up at a bar drinking way more than I should have. I called a friend to come get me, and he took me back to his place. I crashed there for the night, too drunk and angry to face my wife. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a deep sense of shame. I knew I had to go back home and face the mess I had made. When I got there, my wife was waiting for me, looking exhausted and terrified. We didn't say much at first, just stared at each other across the living room. She started to explain, saying that she had been feeling neglected and unappreciated, and that the affair was a mistake. But her words felt hollow. The trust was shattered, and I couldn't see how we could ever repair it. Despite everything, a part of me still loves her. Our history, our kids, and the life we built together means so much to me. But I don't know if I can get past this betrayal. I'm filled with anger, sadness, and confusion. How do you move forward when the person you love has hurt you so deeply? I've been thinking a lot about what to do next. Some days, I feel like fighting for our marriage, hoping that we can somehow rebuild. Other days, I just want to walk away and start over. It's a constant battle in my mind, and I don't know what the right choice is. We had one last counseling session where I told her I couldn't do it anymore. I told her I wanted a divorce. She broke down, pleading with me to reconsider, saying she would do anything to make it right. But I was done. I couldn't put myself through any more pain, and I certainly didn't want our kids growing up in such a toxic environment. I moved out that weekend and got a lawyer. It didn't take long for the divorce proceedings to start, and it quickly turned ugly. She wanted to keep the house, primary custody of the kids, and spousal support. I couldn't believe she had the audacity to ask for so much after everything she put me through. Our trial began, and it was a tough battle from the start. Her lawyer painted me as a violent, unstable husband, using the hotel incident as evidence. My lawyer countered with proof of her infidelity, showing the court the messages between her and Chris, as well as the hotel records. It felt like our whole marriage was being dissected and scrutinized by strangers, and it was exhausting. Each day in court was a grueling ordeal. We had to relive all the pain and betrayal, airing our dirty laundry for everyone to see. Friends and family members were called as witnesses, each side trying to prove their case. I was fighting for joint custody of our kids and a fair division of assets, but she was determined to get as much as she could. The kids were caught in the middle, and it broke my heart to see them so confused and upset. They didn't understand why their parents were fighting so much, and I tried my best to shield them from the worst of it. I just wanted what was best for them, but the constant legal battles made it hard to stay focused on that. One of the toughest days in court was when my wife took the stand and started talking about our marriage. She twisted the truth, making herself look like the victim. Hearing her lies, knowing the real story, made my blood boil. But I had to keep my composure, not only for the sake of the trial but also for my kids. I couldn't afford to lose my temper again. My lawyer did a great job of poking holes in her testimony, but it was still an uphill battle. The judge was sympathetic to both sides, and it was clear that this was going to be a long, drawn-out fight. I've been staying with a friend while the trial continues, and it's been hard to keep my spirits up. Some days, I feel like I'm drowning in all the legal paperwork and court appearances. I'm constantly worried about how the kids are coping with everything. They're staying with their mom most of the time, and I miss them terribly. I keep reminding myself that I'm doing this for them. They deserve to have both parents in their lives, and I'm fighting to make sure they get that. But the toll it's taking on me is immense. I feel drained, emotionally and physically, and sometimes I wonder if I can keep going. Hey everyone, back with another update. This has been one of the hardest and most painful experiences of my life, and I can't thank you all enough for the support and advice you've given me. Your comments have kept me sane through this ordeal. So, here's where things stand. After our explosive confrontation at the hotel, I knew I couldn't go back. The trust was shattered beyond repair, and I had to think about my own well-being and the future of my kids. I filed for divorce, and that's when the real nightmare began. My wife turned into someone I hardly recognized. She became vindictive and manipulative, doing everything she could to make my life miserable. She moved out of our house and took the kids with her, insisting that she needed space to think. In reality, she was trying to position herself as the primary caregiver, setting the stage for the custody battle that was about to ensue. The trial began a few weeks later, and it quickly became apparent that this was going to be a long and grueling fight. Her lawyer was ruthless, painting me as an unstable and unfit father. They brought up the hotel incident, twisting it to make it seem like I was a violent maniac who couldn't control his temper. It was infuriating to sit there and listen to these lies, knowing the truth of what happened. In court, my wife played the victim card perfectly. She cried on the stand, talking about how she felt neglected and unloved in our marriage. She conveniently left out her affair with Chris and the fact that she had been lying to me for months. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, and it was clear that the judge was sympathetic to her. But I wasn't going to go down without a fight. My lawyer was amazing, systematically dismantling her claims and presenting evidence of her infidelity. We had the messages between her and Chris, the hotel records, and even testimonies from mutual friends who knew about the affair. It was brutal, but it was necessary. One of the most intense moments came when my wife's lawyer called our kids to testify. I was horrified that they would drag our children into this mess, but I had no choice but to sit there and watch. My son, bless his heart, tried to stay neutral, but my daughter was clearly influenced by her mother. She said things that were clearly fed to her, talking about how daddy was always angry, and mommy just wanted to be happy. It broke my heart to see how much she was being manipulated. Outside of court, things were just as tense. My wife refused to let me see the kids outside of our scheduled visitation hours, and even then, she made it as difficult as possible. She would forget to drop them off on time, or would schedule activities during my time with them. It was a constant battle, and it wore me down. One night after another frustrating day in court, I came home to find a letter from my wife's lawyer. She was demanding full custody of the kids, claiming that I was emotionally unstable and unfit to be a parent. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this to me, to our kids? The next day in court, things escalated even further. Her lawyer presented a series of photos showing me at a bar, clearly drunk and disheveled. They were from the night after the hotel incident when I had hit rock bottom. My wife claimed that this was typical behavior for me, that I was a drunk and couldn't be trusted around our kids. My lawyer countered with testimonies from my friends and family who spoke about my character and my dedication to my kids. But the damage was done. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation to determine if I was fit to have joint custody. It felt like another blow, another way for her to keep the kids from me. During all of this, I tried to stay strong for my kids. I called them every night, tried to reassure them that I loved them and that none of this was their fault. But I could hear the strain in their voices, the confusion and fear. It tore me apart. I also started seeing a therapist, trying to deal with the overwhelming stress and anger. It helped a bit, giving me a safe space to vent and process everything that was happening. But there were days when it felt like too much, like I was drowning in all the lies and manipulation. One particularly bad day, my wife showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was furious, accusing me of trying to turn the kids against her. We had a screaming match right there in the hallway, saying things that can never be unsaid. She threatened to take the kids and move out of state, to make sure I never saw them again. It was a low blow, and it left me reeling. The next day in court, she dropped the bombshell. She wanted to relocate with the kids to another state, claiming it was for a better job opportunity. It was clear that this was just another tactic to keep the kids away from me, but I was terrified that the judge might actually grant her request. My lawyer fought hard, arguing that moving the kids out of state would be devastating for them and for me. We presented evidence that her so-called job opportunity was a lie, that she was just trying to run away. But it was another uphill battle, and I could see the toll it was taking on everyone involved. At one point, my wife's lawyer tried to paint me as unfaithful, bringing up old rumors and insinuations that had no basis in reality. It was a desperate move, but it showed just how far she was willing to go to win. My lawyer managed to discredit most of it, but the damage was done. It was another blow to my already fragile reputation. Throughout all of this, I kept thinking about my kids, how they were handling all of this, what they must be feeling. I tried to keep in touch with them as much as possible, but it was hard. My wife was doing everything she could to alienate them from me, and it was working. They started to seem distant, confused about what was happening. I remember one night, after a particularly brutal day in court, my son called me. He sounded so small and scared, asking if I was going to leave them. It broke my heart. I reassured him that I wasn't going anywhere, that I would fight for them no matter what. But it was hard to keep the despair out of my voice. As the trial dragged on, the stress took a toll on my health. I was losing weight, barely sleeping, and constantly on edge. My friends and family were worried about me, but there was nothing they could do. I was in survival mode, just trying to get through each day. Then there was the day my wife showed up at my place with Chris. She had the nerve to bring him along to drop off the kids. It was a slap in the face, and I could feel the rage boiling up inside me. I wanted to punch him right there, but I knew that would only make things worse. Instead, I swallowed my pride and took the kids inside, trying to ignore the smug look on his face. That night, I had a long talk with my kids. I told them the truth about what was happening, about why their mom and I were fighting. It was hard, and I tried to keep it age-appropriate, but they deserved to know. My daughter cried, asking why everything had to change. My son was angry, demanding to know why I couldn't just make it better. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. In court, things were reaching a boiling point. My lawyer was doing everything he could, but it was clear that the judge was losing patience with both sides. There were days when I felt like giving up, like it was all too much. But then I would think about my kids, and I knew I had to keep fighting. One day, after another long session in court, my wife cornered me in the hallway. She was furious, accusing me of dragging out the trial just to spite her. We had a heated argument right there, with her shouting about how I was ruining her life. I fired back, telling her that she was the one who had destroyed everything. It got ugly, with both of us saying things we probably didn't mean. But it was clear that any hope of an amicable resolution was gone. The psychological evaluation was grueling. I had to sit through hours of questioning, reliving every painful moment of our marriage and the aftermath. The evaluator was thorough, asking about my mental health, my relationships, and my ability to care for the kids. It was exhausting, but I knew it was necessary. When the report came back, it was a mixed bag. The evaluator acknowledged the stress I was under and the emotional toll of the divorce, but also noted that I had strong support systems and a genuine love for my kids. It wasn't a definitive win, but it was enough to keep fighting. The trial continued, each day blending into the next. My lawyer and I strategized constantly, trying to anticipate my wife's next move. It felt like a never-ending chess game, with my kids' future hanging in the balance. Then, there was the day my wife's lawyer presented new evidence. They had somehow obtained private messages between me and my therapist, painting me as emotionally unstable. It was a low blow, and I felt violated. My lawyer argued that it was an invasion of privacy, but the damage was done. It was another hit to my credibility. Outside of court, things were just as tense. My wife continued to make it difficult for me to see the kids, and every interaction with her was fraught with tension. One day, during a scheduled drop-off, we got into another heated argument. She accused me of trying to turn the kids against her, and I fired back that she was the one doing the damage. The kids were right there witnessing the whole thing, and it broke my heart. As the trial dragged on, I tried to stay connected with my kids as much as possible. We had movie nights, went to the park, and I tried to create some sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. But it was hard. They were confused, hurt, and caught in the middle. I did my best to reassure them that I loved them and that we would get through this, but some days it felt like a losing battle. There were moments of hope, small victories in court that kept me going. My lawyer managed to discredit some of my wife's more outlandish claims, and we had witnesses who testified to my character and my dedication as a father. But the constant back and forth was wearing me down. One particularly tough day, my wife accused me of hiding assets, claiming that I was trying to cheat her out of her fair share. It was a ridiculous accusation, but it meant more paperwork, more time in court, and more stress. My lawyer handled it brilliantly, but it was yet another example of how far she was willing to go to win. Throughout all of this, I kept thinking about the endgame. What would happen when the trial was over? Would we be able to co-parent effectively, or would it be a constant battle? I wanted to believe that we could find a way to make it work for the sake of the kids, but every interaction with my wife made me doubt that possibility. There were days when I felt like I was drowning in all the lies and manipulation. I would sit in my car after a day in court, feeling utterly defeated. But then I would think about my kids, about how much they needed me, and it would give me the strength to keep going. As the trial neared its conclusion, The tension was palpable. Both sides were exhausted, and it felt like we were reaching a breaking point. My wife's lawyer continued to push for full custody, while my lawyer fought for joint custody and a fair division of assets. One day, during a particularly intense cross-examination, my wife broke down on the stand. She admitted that she had lied about some of the details, that she was just trying to protect herself and the kids. It was a small victory, but it felt like a turning point. The judge called for a recess, and I took a moment to breathe. I looked around the courtroom, at my wife, at our lawyers, and at the judge. It was clear that this was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But as I left the courtroom, my wife approached me. She was angry, saying that I had pushed her to this point, that it was all my fault. We had another heated argument right there in the hallway, with her accusing me of ruining her life and me firing back that she had destroyed everything we had built. It was a harsh reminder that this fight was far from over. The trial was still ongoing, and there were still battles to be fought, but I was determined to keep going, for the sake of my kids and for my own sanity. Final update. Hey everyone, back with the final chapter of this nightmare. Before I dive in, I just want to thank all of you again for your support and advice. You've been a lifeline through this mess. So here's where we're at now. After months of a brutal trial, the judge made a decision that felt like a punch to the gut. Despite all the evidence of my wife's infidelity and manipulative behavior, I lost. She got full custody of the kids, and I was given limited visitation rights. Plus, I had to pay a huge amount in child support and alimony. It was devastating. My wife was smug and triumphant in court. She had played the victim perfectly, and the judge bought it. I felt betrayed by the system, by her, and even by myself for not being able to protect my kids from this outcome. Leaving the courtroom that day, I felt completely defeated. In the weeks that followed, I tried to adjust. I focused on making the most of my limited time with the kids, ensuring they felt loved despite everything. But my wife made it difficult, often forgetting to drop the kids off or planning activities during my visitation hours. It was clear she was determined to make this as painful as possible. Months went by, and I noticed changes in her. She became erratic and unpredictable. Initially, I thought it was just stress, but then I started hearing rumors from mutual friends about her spending time with a shady crowd and behaving recklessly. One day, I got a call from the school. My son had been caught with a small bag of marijuana. He was scared and confused, and when I asked him where he got it, he said it was from my wife's stash. That's when everything clicked. She was using drugs, and it was affecting our kids. I decided to investigate further. I got in touch with some of her old friends, who confirmed my suspicions. My wife was using drugs heavily, neglecting the kids, and spending money recklessly. Her appearance was deteriorating rapidly. I knew I had to do something. For the sake of my kids, I couldn't let them stay in that environment. I contacted my lawyer and started the process of appealing the custody decision. It was going to be another uphill battle, but I was determined to protect my children. We gathered as much evidence as we could. I documented her erratic behavior, the neglect, and got testimonies from some of her friends. It was painful to relive all the hurt and betrayal, but necessary. The appeal took months to get to court, and things only got worse in that time. She was arrested for possession of narcotics and DUI. This time, she couldn't hide her actions. The police reports and court records painted a clear picture of her descent. When we finally got to court for the appeal, it was a different atmosphere. My wife's lawyer tried to downplay her actions, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge couldn't ignore the clear danger she posed to the kids. The judge reversed the custody decision. I was granted full custody, with my wife allowed supervised visitation until she could prove she was clean and stable. It was a bittersweet victory. I was relieved to have my kids safe, but it was heartbreaking to see how far she had fallen. In the months that followed, her life continued to spiral. She lost her job, her house, and most of her friends. She was in and out of rehab, struggling to get clean. I tried to support her from a distance for the kids' sake, but it was clear she had a long road ahead. One day, out of the blue, she called me crying, saying she had hit rock bottom and didn't know where else to turn. She begged me for help, saying she wanted to get clean for good this time. Despite everything, a part of me still cared about her. She was the mother of my children, and I didn't want to see her destroy herself completely. I agreed to help her find a rehab program and offered support through the process. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the right thing to do for the kids. Weeks turned into months, and she started making progress. She completed the rehab program and started attending regular support group meetings. She found a job and began rebuilding her life, one step at a time. Then, just when things seemed to be stabilizing, I received another anonymous letter. This one contained photos of her leaving a bar late at night looking drunk. My heart sank. Had she relapsed? Was all her progress undone? I confronted her, and she broke down. She admitted she had slipped up, that the pressure of rebuilding her life got to her. She was ashamed and scared, but promised it was just a one-time mistake and that she would get back on track. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to trust her, but another part of me was terrified this was the beginning of another downward spiral. I had to protect my kids but didn't want to abandon her when she needed support the most. I talked to my friends and family seeking advice. The consensus was to set firm boundaries and ensure she had the right support system. I arranged for her to meet with her therapist more frequently and suggested she stay with a friend who could provide a stable environment. It was a tough decision, but I knew it was the right one. I had to prioritize the kids' safety while supporting their mother. It was a delicate balance, and I hoped this would be the wake-up call she needed. In the months that followed, things started to improve again. She recommitted to her recovery, attending meetings and therapy sessions regularly. She moved into a sober living house, providing a structured and supportive environment. The kids and I continued building our new life, focusing on creating positive memories and experiences. We went on trips, spent time with friends and family, and supported each other through the ups and downs. It wasn't perfect, but it was our life, and we were making the best of it. One evening, as we were watching the sunset, my daughter said, "Dad, I'm proud of you. You never gave up on us." It was a simple statement but meant the world to me. It reminded me why I fought so hard and endured all the pain and hardship. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that happened, I feel a mix of emotions. Relief that the trial is over and my kids are safe. Sadness for what my wife went through and the impact it had on us. But most of all, hope. Hope that we can heal, move forward, and create a better future.